First speaker is Matthew Elliott from Collective Encounters.
Oh, just can't do a computer from that way around. Lovely, so the PowerPoint is just going to be running in the background with lots of pictures and quotes of some of the work which we do. So, as I said, my name is Matthew Elliott. I'm the Youth Theatre Director at Collective Encounters. We're a theatre company based in Liverpool. I'm kind of going to give a bit of a practical overview of some of the work, but also some of the theoretical context and the frameworks that inform our work. Jenny pointed out a really interesting thing this morning, which I was going to kind of do as a prologue towards this conversation, that austerity, as we're told, is born out of economic necessity. It's not. For me, austerity is the ideology of neoliberalism. It is the underlying principle of neoliberal ideology, and that is the rolling back of the state, the minimum state intervention. So austerity as ideology, not out of economic necessity. So Polly Toynbee pointed this out very, very apt for me while she was doing the review of the summer budget, and she stated that the UK state will be smaller than the US as a proportion of GDP by 2019. Prior to the July budget, the IMF and the OECD projected the UK state would fall to about 36.6%, very close to the US, who are sitting at about 35%. But then Germany, GDP spend on state is about 45%. So the constant rolling back of the state as a means of neoliberal ideology. And obviously with the £12 billion welfare reductions, a further 1.6 reduction. So as you can see, there's an economic shift in ideology away from the social democrat kind of Scandinavian way of thinking in kind of investing within the state towards a more US-based way of minimum state intervention, especially within welfare spending, which is probably very going to promptly be seen in our autumn review with a potential 40% cuts in arts spending. So how does austerity perpetuate inequality? So the mantra on the right would be, where public sector goes, private sector can fill in. Obviously, there's quite a big difference between the ideal and the real within this, is that private sector does not always pick up where public sector leave off, and only those who then have an economic capital or a social capital to go out and access other services can go and do so. But for some of the most marginalised communities we work with in Liverpool and Merseyside, they don't have the capital to do so. They don't have the basic needs to go out and access healthcare where it's not accessible. So again, the inequality begins as a result of the complete reduction of welfare state spending. You see it in the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient, the model of measuring inequality. UK is about 0.25. Scandinavian, Denmark, about 0.12, I believe. Whereas if you look at more unequal societies such as Chile, for example, which some people would argue was the guinea pig for some of the neoliberal ideology we see in modern society, they have a nice high Gini coefficient, about 0.51, only being trumped by Brazil, about 0.53. So inequality as a result of austerity. And austerity is the means of neoliberalism, to reduce state intervention. So what does theatre do? What do Collective Encounters do? What way do we kind of look at challenging this discourse, which is a global discourse? It's the discourse of the global political economy. So the Collective Encounters work is framed under the umbrella of poverty and inequality, because the piece and the performances we create will be different. Always be different because it's led by our participant groups, but always from the deep-rooted belief that we live in an inherently equal and unjust society, and that theatre has a very significant role to play as a tool for change, to explore the problems and solutions and to empower our citizens and communities. So that's kind of our drive. That's the reason why we create theatre, especially in this context of further inequality. That's the theatre we aim to make. So just to give you an overview of how the company works, we have three main strands. We have a participatory strand, a professional strand, and a research strand. So participatory strand is obviously the work based in the community. So for example, that we have our youth strand, we have our third age theatre. We work with adults with complex needs, people who may have been on the receiving end of homelessness, and we work with adults who have had mental health issues within St Helens. So just to kind of zone in a bit more on that, I'll talk about the youth programs that's what I've been leading on for the last 2 years, is that we run a core and outreach model. So we have our core group meets every Tuesday. The performances and all that work is derived from the issues they want to explore and investigate. Open door policy, no auditions, we provide transport and refreshments in order to get these young people through the door. We have an open door policy. Obviously, having an open door policy does not mean that somebody is going to walk through it. So what we do then, we have our outreach model. So I'll go out into the community to where young people would never ever have the idea to go, oh, I'll go to youth theatre on Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? So we go out and take art out into those communities as a means to bridge this gap between the outreach and core. And that works with looked after children, young people living in supported accommodation, young carers, as a means to always be able to reach out to those most marginalised communities. And sometimes they don't want to come to the core, and that's absolutely fine. So how do we make that kind of intervention to say, worthwhile, we provide the Arts Award, so there's an accreditation there, which can then go on to CV, help them with potential employability skills. So on to the third age, very similar, outreach and core once again, core groups creating core performances, outreach going out to day centres across Liverpool and Merseyside, very similar with the Transitions project, which is quite exciting for us. It's just the start of a new 3-year project, working all over Merseyside, created 5 hubs, working with each separate hub as a means to continually create performances. So the professional strand kind of is what it says on the tin, professional actors, professional performance standards. To give you an example of this, it's House of Memories Commission. I don't know if anyone's very au fait with that, which happened at National Museums Liverpool at the moment. We were commissioned to create our play as a means to look at training professional carers and also family carers into more person-centred care for individuals who have Alzheimer's or dementia. So we use techniques such as forum theatre. Professional carers would come first thing in the morning, about 9 o'clock, and they would stay right up until 5, and the play would be interspersed throughout the day with forum kind of discussions, forum theatre techniques, as well as kind of group discussions, as a means to look at what ways can theatre, as a tool, create that discussion for more dignified care for people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. And then the research strand at the end is led by our artistic director, Sarah Thornton, who looks at contemporary thinking, contemporary policy, contemporary strategy, so that our work is always informed and it's up to date and contemporary. So we have our 3 little strands. None of them ever sit isolated. They always, it was one of those lovely academic diagrams, it had little arrows pointing everywhere and they'll all inform one another. So that's the way the work things, that's why none of our work we'll never see is going off to do Les Mis for a pantomime or something like that. The work is completely true and honest to the work which our communities want to create. They might want to create Les Mis one day, we'll never know. But also at the same time, there's making sure that the research, professional and participatory all inform one another. So we came out of North Liverpool. North Liverpool was our base. Any Scousers in the house? Lovely. So North Liverpool is historically one of the most deprived areas in the UK. So it's ranked in the top 10 of England's indices of multiple deprivation. Living standards are a lot lower, life expectancy is a lot lower. Unemployment in Tubrick is 3 times higher than the national average. There's a range of different theories and reasons why the deprivation people might say that a lot of the dockers' families came out of there and that industry was taken away. Very similar to what we were hearing this morning about South Wales and the mining communities. That an industry was taken out and nothing was there to replace, which then creates marginalised, no employment for skilled workers. So over the last 2 years or so, our work started to branch out into wider Merseyside, but North Liverpool was where we started. We started to look at ways in which the arts can be working with community groups as a means to challenge thinking and to explore issues. So that's kind of the pragmatics of how we work, the location where we came from. But just to kind of have a look at the theoretical framework at the moment, is that we made a decision about 2 years ago to look at this way of going from a liberal change agenda to a more radical change agenda. By liberal, I'm talking about more individual change, kind of what we hear quite a lot of, individual change, probably a lot more favoured, sometimes within funding structures, looking at self-confidence, self-esteem, soft skills, employability skills, which we do not kind of just push to the core, and we believe in that, but we also believe that we have to have a more deeper understanding and awareness of the wider political and social context of our time. So we take this shift from this liberal agenda right through to the more radical agenda. And this is informed by such people of Hart and Negri and this idea of the multitude of opposition, but also informed by other people such as John Holloway, who's a sociologist, and the interstitial movement for change. And by that, and what John would use as an analogy, he would talk about, say, capitalism, which we see as the dominant kind of idea and force within contemporary society. He would see it as a big block of ice, say, for example. And he'd see that each resistance movement, each social movement, would create a crack in that ice. If you put lots of cracks into an ice, it will break up and it will go. So that's John Holloway's kind of way of thinking. Because we know that we will not be having an upturning the government sometime tomorrow, but we know that we have to make a change within our community. So we believe in this interstitial movement, and also about making and creating partnerships with the wider social justice movement. The arts, as we all know, cannot sit and live on their own, they do not exist on their own, and change happens through a wider spectrum of movements. Whether that be gardening, whether that be cooking, whatever way it is, the social justice movement, the arts are part of a much bigger spectrum there. So we see ourselves as part of that conversation. In a more practical kind of level, in terms of in the workshop room and some of our actual practice, undeniably the work is completely informed by the work of Paulo Freire and pedagogy of the oppressed and the work of conscientization. And how does our work inform to make individuals and communities transformative change from objects, those who are known and acted upon, to subjects, those who know and act, and start to get a deeper understanding of the social, political context of their lives, and they understand how they change that. So Hart and they agree, this interstitial kind of movement and the work of Freire's critical pedagogy, they're kind of the theoretical frameworks that underlie us. As well as we use a complete mad range of different theatrical tools from Bilal's Forum Theatre. We use a lot of cabaret work because we believe that practice should not become dogmatic. It should always be informed or in dialogue with the communities we work with. Not to become guru or become a demagogue of some kind of practice, but to have the dialogue with the community groups we work with. So that's kind of the backlog of where we've come from, our practice. So how does it work on the ground? What have we actually done? How do we do it? Am I right for time?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just kind of going for it now. And then, so in regards to practical examples of how we employ, I'm just going to skim over two recent examples and I'm going to do a bit more of an in-depth study of a production we created with the youth theatre this summer. So with our third age theatre group, we looked at Wealth is Health. It was a piece which has been out on tour recently in North Liverpool, gone out to day centres. And that looked at health inequalities. As we were talking earlier about reducing services for older people within North Liverpool. However, people who may have more pennies in their pocket can then go out to another service and get the healthcare they need. Talking about how do we address the health inequality that's being created by austerity. So that was devised by the group and helped written by our artistic director, Sarah. And then what we've also been working recently within the transitions model is looking at, again, how does our outreach start to inform our core performances? So Abby, who's our transitions manager, has been out working across separate hubs throughout Merseyside, and they've been creating songs, creating bits of performances, and then this is all fed into the performance which goes on tour next week. Farewell Welfare, a cabaret of chopping and cutting, does what it says on the tin. So it's kind of how do these people within this kind of extremely marginalised background, how do they get to actually inform the performances and the core practice that we do? So Abby's been going along collecting songs, collecting sketches, and they're fed into a script which will then be performed by our more longer term members of our core group. So in regards to the youth theatre, what we did, which is quite prompt really, I guess, in regards to the work we're talking about today, was it was actually a creative response to austerity in Liverpool. Liverpool, I believe, please do correct me if I'm wrong, has been the second worst hit council in the UK as a result of local government cuts after Tower Hamlets. 58% in real term funding cuts since 2010, which was very interesting for our young people because the whole performance, which was called The Centre, which I'll come to in a minute, was derived off one simple question which came out of a debate one day. A participant simply asked, what is going to happen when all the money is gone? So we said, oh, okay, what is going to happen? What what will happen? Someone said, oh, well, no, it won't ever get that bad, the government will intervene and all the rest of it. And so, oh no, people, big rich people might come in and help support. And all. So we had these mad kind of conversations. And as a result of that, we created a performance called The Centre. The Centre was set about 15 years in the future after Liverpool City Council had a 100% funding cut. To you, as an audience member, it was presented as the perfect utopia. It was where all your hopes and dreams were satisfied, you could all get a good education and all the rest of it. But underneath was the underlying dystopia, which was led by the character of the manager, who kind of came in quietly in the middle of scenes, playing on a very weird Harold Pinter menacing kind of style and picking people out quietly. People were disappearing, people didn't really understand what was happening. But the way in which we did it, we decided we wanted to be immersive. We did an immersive piece of fit. We took over 4 levels of the building, which was very exciting. And the audience members would come in as residents for the day, and we'd allow them to come. They were allowed to walk off through the corridors on their own, and then we'd all re-intervene for our kind of group performances. So all devised work, ensemble-based work, using song, using physical theatre. One of the very most important things for not just collective encounters, but the youth theatre who we work with, is that the work has to be good. The work has to be, I know it sounds really strange, it has to be really good. And these guys who I've worked with now for about 2.5 years really want good quality theatre. We go and see other shows sometimes, and you know, it's nothing worse when someone, a young person who's there, might not have ever been to theatre, comes out and says, that's shit. You know, you kind of go, okay. So they have a real drive for high quality theatre. So that's why we did this immersive work. It was very short, intimate performance, 15 people per performance. We wanted to try different things, we wanted to experiment, which was very exciting. But also at the same time, having this really high quality production, we had to have a very high quality political process at the same time. So we worked around 9 months on creating the show. We had a mad range of discussions. We watched things from John Pilger's War on Democracy to having a cup of tea and discussing the big society policy framework. We had these discussions because people wanted the work to be kind of seal-proof. If someone came up to them after the show and asked why they were saying that, they had their answer. They didn't want to just kind of go down this route of saying, that's bad. They wanted more than that. So we went through this really long process. So really high-quality theatre work with a really good high-quality political performance. So the idea really for them, we did a range of things. Satire was one of the key things. Young people, for me anyway, in the group, they just loved satire. They grabbed hold of it, loved the absurdism. An example of that was in the job centre scene. Someone was called up to their advisor and they were, I've got this problem and all the rest of it. And they said, oh, well, we'll give you the food bank leaflet. So they got the food bank leaflet. Then someone said, oh, can you give them the job employment leaflet? And they got the job employment leaflet. Someone said, can you give the housing leaflet? And so they got the housing leaflet. And right, this one, can you give the leaflet that explains all the other leaflets? You know, it was this kind of way of working which they really enjoyed, which was very exciting for an audience. But at the same time, giving a good old punch in the gut to this force which the young people were very concerned about. And that's why we created the centre. So, what change did it come? Obviously, Joe Anderson wasn't on the phone the next day saying we're going to revert all the austerity measures in Liverpool as a result. But what it did do for us, as Freya would talk about, it's about demystifying. He would say that the dominant forces create myths in order to control. So what we saw this performance as was a means of demystifying the rhetoric we hear on a daily basis, got to reduce the deficit, but at the same time we'll hear about bankers getting bonuses, etc., etc., etc. So that was it for us. It was about a process of demystifying the myths that we get fed every single day through the media or through politicians. And it was performed for other young people as well, to have that conversation with other people in that age group. I was with the group last night and we had a conversation. I said, I'm going to talk to these lovely people tomorrow. And I said, what do you want me to say? He said, can you let them know we are not ignorant? We're not ignorant young people. We do have an understanding of the way the world works. It may be our understanding, it may be different to yours, but it's our understanding. And this is what that was just the one line which I wanted to say. So I'll go back next week and I'm sure you'll be a very happy man I told you that. So the continuity of the process. Continuity is key. The idea is a minute, love it, finish it, fantastic. So the idea about the continuity of the process, we potentially remount it. But just to finish on, the work is an ongoing process. It's not about kind of destroying the austerity discourse, it's more about creating cracks in the discourse. Create the cracks, the opening allowing other people to experience that as well. And let's make lots of cracks and look at the ways in which we can change that discourse. Just to finish on is a quote by John Holloway. I like to think that the work, especially that we did with the young people as a result of the centre, was not just an addressing of an issue, but was also a discussion about its contradictions. So John Holloway would say, rather than looking to the hero with true class consciousness, a concept of revolution must start from the confusions and contradictions that tear us all apart. Thank you.